The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
8.5 after 8. Very good morning to you. Welcome to the Forum at 8 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. Well, it turns out then that Acting Chief Magistrate Daniel Tulare is a little concerned about how the media has been covering the Oscar Pistorius murder case. Yesterday, he raised these concerns. He expressed them quite sharply. He spoke of a trial by media, but also asked the authorities to investigate. With one of the things that he said is that he wanted this done so that it did not have a negative impact on the South African judicial system or scandalize it. Well, let's understand what the concerns are and whether or not do they have any basis in law or even in terms of the ethics. Is there any reason for the chief magistrate to be, or the acting chief magistrate to be concerned about how this matter has been covered? My experts then on the line. Let me start with Duncan Wild. He's an associate at Weber Wenzel, but also a media expert, media law expert, that is. Mr. Wild, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time also. Philip de Wet is a senior writer and associate editor at the Mail and Guardian. He was there yesterday. Philip, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. David Smith is the Africa correspondent of the UK Guardian. David, nice having you on the radio again. Good morning.
Thanks again. Good morning.
Much appreciated. Professor Pierre de Vos is a lecturer of constitutional law at the University of Cape Town. Good to have you again, Prof.
Good morning.
Thank you. Philip, let me start with you. You were there. I just want to know from you, in terms of summary, having heard what the acting chief magistrate had to say, do you think there's a possibility that some journalists may be criminally charged?
That's not quite clear to us. Of course, the first thing that we asked the NPA after the magistrate made these comments is, are there investigations underway? Will anyone be charged? With specific reference to the most recent issue being Sky News' publication of those bloody bathroom pictures, the NPA was quite cagey on the matter, giving us no indication one way or the other, saying simply that if the law had been broken, then there would, of course, been investigations. In other words, making quite general noises. But at this point, we simply don't know.
But it does sound a little like the acting chief magistrate was also quite cagey. He wasn't specific about what concerns him the most.
Well, absolutely. He didn't speak about any specific media outlets. He didn't refer to any specific cases. In fact, he spoke perhaps more about generally society's interest in this matter and how that relates than to media coverage. So, vague noises of concern rather than a bench coming down hard on the media.
Mr. Wild, but upon reflection then, given the comments by the acting chief magistrate yesterday, has the media crossed the line in its reporting on this matter?
Well, as Philip was saying, it's not exactly clear what crime he's talking about. The two sort of possibilities fall under contempt of court. There's scandalizing the court and breaching the sub judice rule. And there's two recent decisions on both of them that would make it very hard for the media to breach these rules. The sub judice rule requires real and substantial prejudice to the administration of justice. And even then, the court will still have to decide whether it would be better to allow the information out or not. So I can't really see anything that would come close to violating that principle. The scandalizing the court is more directed at criticizing judges. If you're saying a judge is corrupt and that kind of thing, or influenced by improper motives. And again, that hasn't really been the case here. So on those two sort of forms of contempt of court, the media seems to be fine.
Prof, do you think that the media is in the clear on those two forms of contempt?
Well, there's a difference between what is legal, of course, and what is wise to publish. Now, this whole notion of scandalizing the court or trial by media, I find a little bit silly, quite frankly, because whenever somebody is charged with a criminal offense, ordinary people are going to make assumptions about that person's guilt or innocence. It is better that people, wait until they have more information, but most people won't. So if they read in the paper about a person like the so-called Modimolle monster or about the person charged with the rape of Anine Boyson, then people are going to have a tendency to make up their mind about whether the person is guilty or not. But that's completely irrelevant, because the Constitution only says that the judge or the presiding officer must presume that the person is innocent until proven guilty. And that is a right you have, that presiding officer, not ordinary people, but a presiding officer, will actually believe that. And our courts have said that the presiding officers, judges and magistrates are specially trained to make sure that they are not swayed by these things in the media. So it might be that it's not tasteful, but some people will be upset about it. But also they seem to have a double standard, because if you're rich and famous, they are more upset than if you're poor and black. So for those reasons, I would not really think that there is a big problem here at all.
Sure. But what in instances, and Philip has alluded to this, in instances where evidence may be used by, I beg your pardon, by the media. Let's take, for instance, that Sky News report where the crime scene is shown, blood and all those kind of things. Does that not materially affect the case then?
Well, as the previous participant said, the sub judice rule, which under which this would fall, requires that you have to show that there will be demonstrable and substantial risk to the fairness of the trial. And because if you have pictures like that, it is not demonstrably and substantially going to influence any presiding officer to decide beforehand on the guilt or innocence of the party. If there is such a presiding officer, that person shouldn't be a presiding officer, because that person is not the kind of person who will keep an open mind. So I cannot see under any circumstances that the sub judice rule was actually breached in this case. And the reason is also very clear. We don't have a jury system. If we had a jury system in which 12 people, ordinary citizens, were actually required to decide on the guilt or innocence, then the rules would have been probably very different. But we don't have that. We have a judge or a magistrate who is specially trained to actually consider this, and that person is not going to be swayed just by having a picture published in the paper. In the same way that you're not going to be swayed by a picture being published of a shootout where there was a cash in transit heist, or for example.
David, in your experience elsewhere, I'm just wondering whether this argument then by the acting Chief Justice would carry or would hold some water if we were elsewhere where there is where it's not just the judge that needs to make a decision, as we've just heard from the Prof.
Yes, I mean, I was also in court yesterday and heard what the magistrate had to say.
Sure.
And it is a very different set of circumstances from my home country, the UK, where there was a huge amount of surprise from the very start of this case, when it was pretty much a free-for-all for both local and international media to write and report and speculate and interview whoever they could and interview the former detective on the case and so on. As one of your speakers mentioned there, the jury system makes a huge difference. In the UK, we have a jury, and therefore there are very strict rules on what can be reported once somebody has been charged with a crime. And I remember covering some of these stories when I was working there, and you would sort of research them and find things out, but there'd be a ban on using any of it, and you'd store it up for many months, ready for publication, really on the day that this person was convicted, if indeed they were convicted. To be honest, in many respects, I really applaud the transparency of the South African court system. That many of the rules, which sometimes can be over strict, are not applying. Even if it is maybe a consequence more of the vagaries of is there a judge or a jury, so I think it's different from many countries, and I think it's also it's been interesting that actually there's probably been less intrusion into Oscar Pistorius's private life in the last few months than one might have seen in Britain or America. Actually quite few snatched photographs and other things. So I wouldn't entirely condemn everything that's happened, although clearly those leaked photos of the bathroom was a step too far.
Let me just read one or two SMSs. I'll take the news headlines at 8:30. There is an SMS that says, the showing of Pistorius' toilet or bedroom will not cause any damage to the case. That is a view from advocate Ian Mpahlele from Limpopo. Roland says, if any person shoots anyone, even in a break, he would have been head up for murder. Why the law different in this particular case? That's Roland. Suzuki Young in Johannesburg says, "Oh, Oscar knows what he did to his girlfriend. He's a public figure. We need the truth." That's according to Suzuki. And my guest on the program this morning, Duncan Wild, is an associate at Weber Wenzel, is also a media expert, a media law expert, that is. Philip de Wet is a senior writer and associate editor at the Mail and Guardian. I've also got David Smith, he's the Africa correspondent of the Guardian, UK Guardian, and Professor Pierre de Vos is a lecturer of constitutional law at the University of Cape Town. Would like to hear your thoughts on these matters. 0891 104 208, 0891 104 208. Some of the SMSs that have come through here, somebody says, we should be more concerned about who is supplying the media with the photos, etc., instead of seizing the chance to attack the media, in responding to what the acting chief magistrate said. Also, an SMS from Hannes in Kakamas says, please let the media do their job without fear or favor. Let the judiciary do their job as well. There's an SMS that says, this is not new. Most prominent people have been victims of this. President Zuma and Malema were tried by the media. We are used to it. That is Tay in KZN. But Moira says, yes, what a fuss. Pics released for yesterday and a trial on the birthday. And that's Moira on SMS. Tanya says, public figures smile to media when it suits them. Media must capture them, even now. Let me go to the lines then. Andrew is in Cape Town. Andrew, good morning.
Yes,
Hi.
Morning. I just wanted to make a point. I think the issue about is the media on trial here, or is the media a major issue in this case? Perhaps a red herring. I think the media are always going to be victims of their own devices sometimes. But the question here for me is, isn't the NPA on trial? On their recent performances, most recently the Fidentia case, where the judge rapped them over the knuckles for not running it properly. I think they're on trial here. They need to be absolutely sure that they get this case right, no matter what the outcome is.
All right. My guest will respond to you whether there's a link between, of course, some of the cases by the NPA that have been unsuccessful in the past and what happened yesterday. Andrew's in Cape Town. Thank you. Mvusi is in the Eastern Cape. Mvusi Wakaya, good morning.
Look, I don't think Professor de Vos will agree with me on this, given his outburst when he called President Zuma a thug. But my point is related to what one of your SMSs said, that the NPA, to me, seem to be using leaking of information or allowing it as its modus operandi, because we had a similar instance when President Jacob Zuma was charged. Information about his charges was in the media. He even said he saw some of that information for the first time in the media. Why are we now coming back to raise an issue on this particular case? But what we need to do as a country is that SANEF needs to wake up and start engaging criminal law enforcement agencies to agree on protocols of reporting any criminal matter or any matter that is in the criminal court. Because this is what we learn from court and crime reporting, from journalism one, where you say you need to be accurate about what you're reporting. But we should not blame journalists that somebody leaks information to them. Let's blame the organizations that are dealing with the investigation.
Okay.